Basically, yeah. So I started talking to G Unit, or Obsidian Youth, as the like project is called. Presumably, like that's the sort of band name you go by. Yeah.
Yeah. So band name slash artist name for music is Obsidian Youth,
Okay, gotcha.
and then yep.
And G Unit is just like the alias, like username, or something else entirely.
Yeah, it's more just like my gaming persona
Okay, gotcha,
when it really comes down to it.
gotcha.
Yeah,
That makes
and
sense.
it's a callback to where I'm from because the artist who popularized that term G Unit was 50 Cent
Hmm.
from St. Louis, Missouri, and so I'm from St. Louis.
Oh, awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, yeah. Basically, what happened was back. I don't know. It seems like forever because machine learning time, everything's like inflated. But a year ago, when I started on Suno, basically, was doing a bunch of math stuff, and GUnit also was like super into math stuff. And then we just had like a ton of math stuff coming out for like months. GUnit, meanwhile, has continued with math like to like math dubstep, math like basically math everything, math Irish, like we got all the math here, so I love it. It's great, and like you have like extremely fast, like very I don't know, I'd say unique progressions, which I really enjoy. So the instrumental stuff in particular is just, I mean, you have a ton of instrumental stuff. So basically, it was going into that stuff. So now I want to know. This is what's great is I get to actually pick your brain and find out like are how did you get into this? Like, obviously, you said you have a game. You must be a gamer, right? I mean, who isn't
Yeah.
nowadays? But, but like, are you a musician or no experience before this?
No, I am a musician. Plenty of experience in music before
Nice.
this. I started in like early 2000s when I was pretty young in sixth grade, and just learned like the formal aspects of music there,
Nice.
and started with saxophone. Eventually transitioned into drums in high school,
Awesome.
and played in a band for a little bit,
Nice.
and in college. Um, I got into a more serious rock band, and we played in downtown Springfield for a little while.
Nice.
Yeah. So drums has always been kind of my forte there. And then I started picking up string instruments after that, practiced a little bit of ukulele, and eventually got into guitar as well, and that's kind of what I'm learning right now.
Nice.
So I've always been super interested in music, and even before getting into formal aspects of music, I had friends who could show me programs like Fruity Loops,
Hmm.
right? And so I got to see kind of the certain aspects of music editing and putting together digital music, and I thought that was really interesting. So back in that day, I would like pirate versions of Fruity Loops, and then try and make music on them for free, basically, and not really know what I was doing, but trying to learn as much as I could. And I've always been interested in technology. When I was growing up, we had an old desktop computer. You would have to connect to what is it, dial-up internet. I
Yeah.
would have to figure out how to install video games for myself so I could play something like Duke Nukem on PC.
I remember
You
this.
know,
Yes.
yeah,
Like
you'd have to
when.
boot up MS-DOS and stuff
Yeah.
like that to get it to run. So that was kind of my introduction to technology, and those two worlds just easily combined for me. When I started to catch news of the AI movement, I was interested in a program called Gaugan by NVIDIA,
Okay.
which was a painting program. You would draw and use your gesture, and it would fill in textures based on what you told it. So you would paint an area and say, this is sky.
Hmm.
You paint an area and tell it this is ground, and it would create these AI images based on that. I
That's
thought that was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it still
You
is.
know,
In painting is like huge now. It's like,
it's
I mean, it's everywhere. But somehow some people don't know about it. I don't know what's going on with like half the world where it's like AI's like changed everything every day, and like I still have friends where I'm like, have you guys even like used an AI? And they're like, oh, it's a fad. I'm like, I don't know about that. But okay, so you have a huge amount of experience. Well, you have a lot of experience with. I mean, it's not like you went to college for music or anything like that, but you've played in bands, you've played multiple instruments, and you're into both of the like we have a lot of people on here who started with Fruity Loops, like you were mentioning, or other freeware software. that I've interviewed, and so that seems to be like a very common element. I think is like this nexus of like most people already have had some experience with basically DAWs and things like that when they come in, which is kind of interesting to me. I was surprised actually. Okay, so with that being said, so I'm curious to know what's your actual process in terms of like not. I mean, I don't know if you even have a process. If you don't, that's also. But like, what is your process in terms of making music on Suno? And like, do you use like your own stuff to make it, or do you do it solely like using your generations, etc.?
Yeah, that's a big question for me. When I think about process in art, there's a lot to unpack for me, because also my main form of creativity is visual art. So I went to school to get a bachelor's in fine art with an emphasis in painting.
Nice.
And so, yeah, and so I learned a lot in that time about how creating a painting or a visual piece is very much about the process and not so much about the end result. That's what I discovered, at least, is that the value for me was in the process of working and what I could discover there.
Yeah.
Rather than this end result. And so when I look at making audio stuff through not ChatGPT. When I look at making audio stuff through Suno or other AI programs, I think of it largely as a process. And so I'm really engaged with fine-tuning the music as I'm going along. So my process would look like generating something, and then if that sounds good, I'll cut in about 4 seconds in with extend, and then I'll extend from there, and I'll do that over and over and over again. So every 4 to 8 seconds, I'm cutting in and changing the way the music comes through.
Very cool.
So, yep, and usually what that would look like is through genre prompting or style prompting.
Yeah.
So I'll come in and change the genre wildly. So we'll start with a genre like glitch or math or something like that. And then 4 seconds in, I will cut in and tell it to do a completely different genre in order to almost like confuse the AI.
Yes.
That's really like what I'm interested in, is actually trying to trip it up and get it to stop doing something that's logical or makes sense, but to really kind of like push the algorithm or break the code. And that's kind of always what I've been interested in art, is like pushing something to its absolute edge or to its maximum until it breaks down and becomes something else.
Okay, so that makes sense why we started talking so like a year ago in this kind of space. But yeah, exactly the same thing is to me like exploring sort of like I'm not really interested in like what I can do like all the time by just typing in I want to rock. I want to see like what's at the edge of what's possible with the technology. So sort of like pushing it outside of its comfort zone, more or less. Where it knows what to do easily, and seeing like what it does with that. And sometimes it's really incredible when you end up in those places. So I can definitely see that in your music. One of the things I know about Suno, well, Suno has a tendency especially to do patterns in pairs of 2. Right, where it'll repeat a certain melody and then repeat that other melody. You know, if it's a 12-second portion, it'll do another variation of that in 12 seconds, and then it might variate that. And it might even repeat that whole section another time. With your stuff, I have a lot less repetition. And this makes sense now. If you're doing extensions every 4 to 8 seconds, that's like, you know, and you're doing like huge genre switching, etc. So I think that's very interesting. I'm going to have to keep that in mind, because I've kind of moved away from genre switching towards like cover chains. And sometimes I'm like, man, I need to go back and do some more. Like, it's a lot more work, but like the results are really, really good that I see on some of the stuff, especially with version 4.
Absolutely, it is a ton of work when you're coming in and making extensions that often. It kind of feels like you're banging your head against the wall to get exactly what you want.
Right.
And that can go on for like an hour or 2 hours when I'm creating a song. And I may only get about half of the song done with like 2,000 to 3,000 credits.
Yeah.
And so that's just my process. And so I'll dig in a little bit deeper. Sometimes what I do is I will use the get whole song option. about what I see as about halfway through the creation.
Oh, interesting.
So I'll have my song. It's coming along nicely. It feels about halfway done. And I say, go ahead and get the whole song. And then what I do from there is I'll come back in and in and extend from that point
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like the song was dropping off, that I felt like that halfway point was. And then what I'll do is come back in and prompt it to do a chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell it to do a chorus, oftentimes what it's going to do is look back and learn from what it has been doing,
Right.
and then repeat that. And so I can actually modulate and turn that dial of repetition up or down. So
Okay.
I can make a really chaotic section that's like a minute long, cut that, and then come back when I get the whole song and I tell it to do a chorus. It will now repeat that 1 minute section that was incredibly complex as the song. And so now I'll get two sections, a repetition of 1, 2, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing, the same sequence back to back. And what that does to me is it creates kind of unity in the song.
You're kind
Some
of
of
like
the
trying
songs
to
I
finish
don't-
it out. You mean like with essentially a form of repetition.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're going to have some chaos in the sense of like nothing repeats.
Right.
And then we will repeat all of that. And so then it to me becomes more cohesive and becomes like a real song at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also aware there's forms of music that are progressive and they don't have any repeat to them, they just kind of this ongoing sort of narrative or story.
Right.
And so I make songs like that occasionally too, but I like to bring repetition back in at a certain point in order to kind of make it really feel like a song.
Okay. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So basically, you're doing extensions, and then sort of like a meta, like you have a bigger picture for like how you sort of perceive what your goal is with your music, is you want it to be cohesive by the end, but chaotic at like the minute level.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty successful in my opinion. It never felt to me like your songs are like jazz essentially, where it's just like completely. They're definitely like math. They're very structured, but like not predictable. Like if that makes any
Yes.
sense. So which is not
Absolutely.
It's almost. I mean, to me, the reason why I like math is I always loved Baroque, and so when I found math, I was like, this is Baroque. Like it's basically Baroque, but like I already have listened to enough Baroque where I already know where it's going to go every time you hear a Baroque song, almost always. But math, I was like, this is new. I don't know where this is going. So, yeah, and with your stuff, it's very, very similar. Okay, so fine. With that, well, okay, I'm actually kind of curious. I want to know a little bit more. So did you graduate from art school, or you ended up doing something else?
So I went to a state college in Missouri State University,
Mm-hmm.
and got my bachelor's in painting. And I was also interested in education at the time, so I did a little bit of work with education. I found out that the K through 12 system was not really for me, and is just a little bit too structured.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I decided was, because I was so interested in visual art, that I would try to be an art teacher.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, but I didn't want to do it at K through 12. I wanted to do it with more serious people,
Yeah.
older people basically. And so I decided to pursue teaching at the college level. That meant that I needed to get a master's of fine art.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I really wanted to like stay in Missouri and do that in Springfield, but all of my instructors just encouraged me to get out there in the world. And so I moved out to Portland, Oregon, and I took a master's program in visual studies at Pacific Northwest College of Art.
Cool.
And so, yeah, so I lived up on the Pacific Northwest for a couple of years and pursued that, and got a lot more formal training there, and learned a lot about how to speak about art. And after that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just like, this is nice. This is very interesting. Like I've had other people who've gotten like art stuff, but like basically a master's of fine art. That's kind of cool. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was just what I was interested in, and I was driven to do it. It was an environment that I really enjoyed being a part of, and art is something that I've always excelled at. So I just wanted to really use my abilities to the best that I could.
Yeah.
But yeah. So So I studied at Pacific Northwest College of Art, learned as much as I could there. I learned a little bit about teaching too, and I also started working in this lab, and it was called the Make Think Code
Okay.
Lab, and it's basically a maker space,
Okay.
if you're familiar, right? So it's like 3D printers,
Right.
um, virtual reality, laser cutter, vinyl cutters, all the tech that you would use to create visual art.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my student job while I was there. And I learned a lot there, and I helped them kind of put that lab together. I ended up doing demonstrations for students on how to run 3D printers.
Wow.
And that experience led to eventually me coming back to Missouri and applying for a job at a technical community college.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired me um, to uh, to instruct courses. I'm an adjunct instructor for, a couple different art classes. I
Nice.
teach drawing online. Yeah. And I teach a class called Intro to New Media, where basically I teach students all those things that I mentioned.
Nice.
Yeah,
I
all
was I
those
was
little
gonna
devices.
ask is yeah, I mean it sounds like you have a good amount of experience specifically with like stuff that to me is like like that's art, like like there's no real difference between, like, yes, obviously painting, there are different material differences, but like in terms of like the stuff I've seen people do in virtual reality, for example, like if you've some of the like amazing artists, I'm sure that you saw this, was like back with Quill and stuff like that. There were people doing like entire 3D like dioramas where I remember you could go inside and like zoom into someone's eye and see there's a whole nother world inside that. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. This kind of it's like what a world to make art in right now. I can't even imagine like what
Hmm.
what people just like 20 years ago would think about like the stuff you get the opportunity to experience now. But so that's kind of incredible. So basically, you're an art teacher, which is like I think a lot of people sort of assume that. I don't know. I mean, I know that a lot of the people on Suno are like in similar circumstances, either an art major or people who are musicians, producers, a ton of producers. Some of them not real producers, like you see on anyone who's talking on Reddit is like, I've been a producer for 20 years and like Suno's the worst. But there's also a lot of real producers who really enjoy the software. So I think that's pretty unique and interesting. Do you get to use like your like do you do anything with your music stuff related to your teaching, or is it completely just like a hobby for you basically?
It's the music is almost entirely a hobby
Okay.
and separate. It's like two different worlds. It's like the visual art and the audio art.
Do you
And
use
the
AI
visual
in
art
visual
is,
art, or you okay, very cool.
yeah, yeah. I got really into that for a little while, using Mid Journey
Mm-hmm.
and what was there another tool that was good for visual art creation? I can't remember, but I was using Mid Journey a lot
Mm-hmm.
to make AI art, and that was kind of a wave that went up and down for me. It
Mm-hmm.
was really exciting at first because of the possibilities,
Right.
and then now as the market is really overly saturated with AI visual stuff, we've gotten to a point, I think, where culturally people can tell when they
Mm-hmm.
see an AI piece
Right. Yeah.
more often than not.
More often than not, I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. And and there's often this kind of loss where you feel kind of like a loss of spirit or a loss of like humanity or soul in the
Mm-hmm.
work because a computer has worked on it. I think that there are some AI works that are really interesting, and you can tell that that artist, was pushing the edge and trying to create something unique or give you a window into their world,
Right.
perhaps. And then there's other stuff that's a little bit more on the end of like trite or kitsch,
Right, I agree.
basically.
Derivative, or just repeating the same thing over and over again that everyone's doing in
Hmm.
a circle. I know, I agree
Hmm.
wholeheartedly. So it's sort of like oversaturated to where like these images were like amazing like 6 months ago, like things you never would have thought you would have seen before. Were like the textures, for example, of skin that were just like totally unique and variable in ways that I haven't seen in art before personally, especially with
Hmm.
photography, because a lot of these things would be photography in ways that was like impossible. And then now
Hmm.
it's just like you see that every day, and you're like, okay, I get it. Like, what's next? What do you? So I think it's kind of
Exactly.
yeah. So there's a lot of potential there. I agree. I mean, personally, I'm all for AI art, but I also think there's a huge place for regular. There's always going to be a place for regular artists. Like when I say regular, I mean traditional people who like learn the actual craft. Just because like it's not really the same as like the Industrial Revolution where you had like carpenters get replaced. First off, you still have carpenters now, but art is different fundamentally. It's always gonna. So, but anyway.
Yeah.
So okay, that's very very cool. I had an extra question actually. I threw in here, and I think okay. Well, on the topic of what you were just talking about, the soul or whatever, kind of getting. What's your take on AI itself as like a component of art? Especially since you're an art major, you can kind of speak to this a little bit. I think.
Yeah.
What is your? Do you think like is AI a tool to you? Is AI a like at what point is it no longer art? Do you have like an ethical or a philosophical opinion on this? I'd be curious.
Yeah. I have a couple different opinions on it. I would use a couple different metaphors to describe AI. I would say that AI at first appears to be kind of like silly putty, and it's kind of like a silly putty made out of mirror, where like it's a reflection on the world, but you can shape it in any way that you want to. But no matter how you shape that putty or that clay, it's still always a reflection of what currently exists. And so you can use it as a tool to summon up interesting recombinations of what has been, but it's very difficult to get it to a point of creating something entirely original, right? And so it's a useful tool to that end, to the end of creating something that reflects the world that we live in and perhaps in interesting ways. Of course, it can be really great for giving you a window into your own imagination, visualizing things that could be in your head that you would otherwise have to take a very long time to create. And so in that way, it's an efficiency tool.
Right. I
Right.
see that. Yeah.
So
100%.
speeding up your process there. But I would also say that AI is a little bit like an assault rifle. It's like
Interesting. Okay, I gotta. That's a very huge step in analogies. So
it's a huge step.
it's used a lot in
Yeah.
malls. You're saying? No, that's a bad image too.
That's funny. It's funny though. Right. The idea is that a gun or an assault rifle is useful in some ways, and then it's hurting in other ways, right? And so it depends on whose hands you put it in. It's a very powerful tool.
Right.
But it's neither good nor bad. A gun is neither good nor bad on its face. It depends on in whose hands you put it.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
That's
AI
that's
can
at least my
destroy.
view. My view.
AI is fully capable of doing terrible things. So yes, I think.
Right.
Yeah, we've already had plenty of examples of that, but also, yeah, like you said, amazing things too. I mean,
Yes, it's very powerful. It's very powerful at achieving certain goals. And so you can have somebody who's really well informed, knowledgeable, and has a strong idea of what they want to create, and they can use that tool to a really good or positive end. And then you might have people who don't know as much about what they're doing, and they just produce and proliferate all types of art.
Right.
And it may be good, it may be bad, but in a lot of cases they may not really be an artist or a musician, and so they may produce something that they see as beautiful or interesting, but it could also be something that's coming from a space of just something that's like uninformed
I see.
and amateur. And so they can be sitting there just blasting out round after round of ear-rotting garbage.
Yeah, it's kind of like pollution,
You know?
in a sense, where we're now
Yeah.
kind of stuck, where you have a lot of really great stuff, but it's like getting harder and harder to find it because there's just so much now coming out.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Right.
You know? It
No, I
does
agree.
good, it does bad. Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to see. Yeah, it's. I mean, you can see on Suno, it's a great example, like a little small world example where you have like, it's really hard to find people who are actually interested in like, as okay. I mean, it sounds. I don't really care. I mean, there's a lot of people who are like pushing out a lot of stuff where okay, you have three groups of people to me. The people who are making stuff that's like for their families and stuff, which I actually have a lot of respect for. People are just like, I want to make a song about my freaking cat. I'm like, that's art. Like,
That's
in my
awesome.
opinion,
Yeah.
that's like, I mean, I buy folk art. Like, I love that stuff. So that's essentially what I would call folk art, but like a modern era of AI people. Then you have people who are like artists, dropouts, whatever, who just got really into art. They have an encyclopedic knowledge of material. They're, always experimenting, writing down notes. These are artists. These are people who, to them, it's a craft. They're trying to whatever. And then you have people who are like, like basically like, I sort of resent everyone and I'm just going to produce as much as possible because I think you're all bad and I'm the most beautiful person alive. And I'm going to produce so much stuff. And if you don't like it, I'm going to be very, very hostile and I'm going to do a lot. And so, and we're going to take over, all the whatever. It's very similar to what happened with the original music industry that I see a lot of people complaining about, where there's a lot of nepotism, essentially. So I see basically the same thing happening where people are attempting to get market capture on a market that doesn't even exist yet, but whatever.
Right. Right.
So
I just want to say, in that way, it's really clear to me that AI is neither good nor bad.
right.
It's just here, and you can do whatever you want with it, and it's going to amplify certain aspects of who you are. And to some people, that's great, and for other people, it could not be so great. If you're a narcissist
Right.
and you're amplifying that, it might be pretty annoying to some people. But
I mean, look,
we
to each their own. There's a place for everyone.
to each
yeah, exactly.
exactly. That's the good end of it, is there's a place for everyone. Everybody now has the ability to express themselves
Right.
to the highest degree or higher, and so now we can all just sit and process it now. What is this new stuff that's coming out? Is it good? Is it bad? It's up to us to decide.
It's kind of cool. All right, I like that take. Okay. And I guess I got two other questions. Number one, what are your thoughts on version 4? Do you have any take on it yet?
So at first I was really mad about version 4, right?
Yeah.
Because of the shimmer.
Yeah.
The shimmer,
Ugh.
all-pervading shimmer. It was really terrible.
So
It
it
just kind
bothered
of
you?
ruined.
The-
Oh, big time.
Okay.
Yeah. It ruined my workflow. It just made it to where, half of the stuff that I was producing, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the nature of what I'm creating, which is chaotic and loud and that
It's
sort of
all
thing.
in it. Like
It
it
was
would be
all up in it,
embedded in the
just-
drum beats. I've had the same issue. It's awful.
So I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to wait until it gets better. And probably about a couple weeks ago, I started to notice that those aspects are starting to fade away. There's much less shimmer happening for me.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's like, all right, cool, we're back to working normally. And, I could tell a big difference between the audio clarity, the quality between 3.5 and 4. All you have to do is be working on a song in version 4 and then switch it into 3.5.
Yeah.
And then you'll go, oh, God, this is terrible, and go back to 4. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
agree. I agree. And especially in the beginning, like with the shimmer, I mean, that's what was disappointing about it, actually, because you could hear how much better the audio quality would be, but it was just unusable. So I didn't even want to use 3.5 anymore because I was like, it was just frustrating. But yeah, I agree with you. So I was interested to hear have you noticed any difference in progressions or anything, or in the do you feel like it has better composition, or you don't know yet?
I've noticed that it has something that I've noticed as a repetition, which is it does this for almost every song I create, and that is the progression is layered almost every time.
Okay.
It will begin with one sound, and then it will layer another sound on that, and it'll layer another sound on that, and so it seems to be very focused on creating spatial sound.
I see that.
Layers of sound, which is great.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we wanted. Yeah. And so that's what we need to make it sound more like the type of music that musicians create when they're being incredibly intentional, and they want to create an intentional story or narrative through the layers of sound. Suno is beginning to mimic that process quite well. And so that's what I notice is consistent with version 4 is if you just prompt it, create one song, and listen to the whole song, in most cases, it's going to do this slow layering type approach. And you can, of course, come in and disrupt that if you do what I'm doing, which is extending in every 3, 4, 5 seconds. And I will also note for people who are listening, if you do use this extension method, the less time that you have on the back end of the extension. So what I mean is if you cut in at 4 seconds, you are going to have a smaller sample to look at. And so the next thing you create will be much more different from what you've currently been listening to. Let's say you extend from 30 seconds. You have a much longer sample that it's going to look at, and therefore your next sound that is produced won't be as different. And so you can create things that are drastically different and push the music into a different zone by making the place from which you extend a lot shorter.
Okay, that
essentially.
makes sense.
So if I come in and cut in at 1 second, it has such a small sample to look at that the next thing I create will be wildly different, and it will sound almost like an entirely different song, but those two pieces will be glued together.
Okay, so that, I mean, that makes sense. I've done that a couple times, especially when I get like a unique sound that I like. But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to hear that essentially you're building your stuff in. I mean, you're basically going fully in for like control. You know, that's what I hear with extensions, because the cost is the highest, but the amount of control you get doing that is also by far the highest. So it's basically very, very intentional, which makes sense given you are essentially just super deep in art, probably the deepest into the art world that I have spoken to who's on Suno. That's very, very cool. I assumed you were a professor of like English or something, so it's very cool that you teach, literally teach art and visual art, no less. That's very cool. All right, well, awesome. Do you have a Suno or Udio or other creator that you think people should check out? Not us, obviously, but is there someone, or you don't?
I don't really have anybody on Suno that I could point to specifically and recommend. Yeah, because I don't really follow anybody on Suno.
That's fair.
Honestly, you are the only person that I have really looked at closely. And I think that comes from me being quite picky about
That's fair.
what I listen to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're in the early days, so I don't think it's
Yeah, and Suno to me is really much more interesting from my own perspective, which is push this to the absolute limit and make something that I've never heard before.
Right.
Maybe even something that a human would have a really hard time performing.
Right. Yes.
That to me is exciting. But when you create something with AI that is more of a reflection of what currently exists, in a sense of like, this sounds like a standard song. To me, AI becomes much less interesting in that way. Like, for example, when we're creating visual work, I don't want to use AI to make a realistic image. I want to use it to make the most bonkers, insane image that I possibly can.
Yeah,
and
something that would be a lot of effort, as like if you're doing I love it for collages and certain things like that with like depth and like complexity that like I'm not even sure that some of the things you can make there exist people with the skills to do it, because who on earth would spend time like learning how to make anyway, just some of the stuff you can do is like absurd. So I totally agree with you. It's the same exact like why would I want to make a pop song? The other thing I see a lot is people wanting to get a consistent voice, which to me like one of the things I like about it is I don't have to. Like I remember Gorillaz back in the day. They don't even have they have like a bunch of different people who would sing on tracks and stuff. So I'm like, it's already a thing that existed. It's not even like this is a new concept. So I can have as many voices as I want. And you're thinking like am I gonna pretend to be like a person with a unless it's my voice, like who cares? And also why the who cares? I want to get some complexity on there. I want to get something new and novel. So I'm all for it. I totally get what you're saying, and I really I enjoy your perspective. That was good to hear. As opposed to if I found out you were like a super huge hater and didn't like or like I like making AI pop and I only want. No, I'm just kidding. If I eventually, I'm sure I'll interview someone like that and it'll go great. Well, anyway, awesome. So I'll post a link to G-Unit stuff with this on the Patreon. I recommend everybody check it out. He also has an alt. His alt actually is bigger than his regular account, which is interesting. And yeah, so that's G-Unit. It was great talking to you, man. I'm glad I finally got to meet you. It's been a long ways. Oh, Also, if you could send me a link again to just send me a link to. Do you have more than one music video, or is it just one at the moment?
I've got a couple,
Send
but
me your
yeah, I
best
will
one
send.
because you had some very
Okay.
cool ones that came out like a while before any of this video stuff was becoming popular that I remember were like pretty dope. So if you want to send me one of those,
I
I'd
will
love to
share.
post that with it.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Okay, awesome. Great talking to you, man.
Great talking to you.
See
I'll
you
see
then.
you around.